What is up, folks? This is Jeff Benjamin here with Overtime, episode number 14, I believe. And I'm here with Zac Hall. Fernando is on vacation. He's in Europe somewhere having a ball. What's up, Zac? It is so good to have you on the show. How you doing?
Hey, Jeff. I'm a huge fan of Accidental Tech Podcasts, and I'm glad to be on this extra segment that you guys have been doing.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. So you've been at 9 to 5 for when did you start at 9 to 5?
I started on April the 1st, 2013. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So you recently just had a anniversary then.
We hit number 11. Yeah.
Wow.
Which is the same age as my daughter, so it's really easy to keep up with one or the other, So how
did you what is your origin story?
So I'm from the South. I was born in Alabama. Kind of moved around Georgia, Mississippi, Florida. Went to school at University of South Mississippi, and I was studying journalism. And I did 1 year, and I paid for 1.5 years of school. And then I would say in that time frame, my nerves got to me, and it was just I don't think I was ready for school yet. You know what I mean? And I certainly wasn't stability wasn't there for support, for a 20-year-old. And so I went from there to South Mississippi to stay with my granny, who was my mom. She raised me, and stayed there. The idea there was go to school there and get back on my feet. And so when I was there, I applied. I worked at Sears before that, so I sold TVs. It was my first job out of school, and which was a lot of fun because it was Sears. I don't even know if they're still around anymore. But what I would do was I would sell people on TVs plus warranties, which makes your commission, and then they would go to buy it. And then I would say, well, we don't have inventory today. It'll be here in 2 weeks. And then we'll say, well, Best Buy has it today. So then they go to Best Buy and buy it it was a bad job.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's, hey, I have a weird Sears story.
Yes, go ahead.
I love Sears it has a special place in my heart.
Sure.
It's the weirdest thing, but Sears, my mom used to always go to the mall, and it was torturous. You're a little kid and you're hiding in between the clothing racks and stuff like that. It was terrible. But Sears had a Super Nintendo there, a little kiosk.
Yeah.
And it was like an arcade for me because we would always be in that store for some reason. And I just have really fond memories of playing, almost beating Super Mario World in Sears. It's weird. I know it's weird.
You're living in the Sears catalog.
Yeah, so I have really fond memories. So I would go to Sears, and people were why do you want to go to Sears? You're just weird. I just like the smell, and it just reminded me of childhood. So I don't know. It's kind of weird side story, but anyway. So you worked at Sears, and then what was next?
Yeah, so I went from Sears, and when I was in South Florida, I was talking to Sears there, and they're when I was this isn't really great. So I applied for the AT&T store to sell phones for full-time and the Apple store part-time. And fortunately, my family was supportive of me. They were you don't want to be full-time. You want to be part-time and go to school and everything. And so, and also just you're picking AT&T or Apple, go Apple. And so I did. I worked at the Apple store in Boca Raton, Florida. And it was, I would say 2011 through 2013, and that was kind of a cool period. But during that time, my granny got cancer. She had lung cancer, which is out of nowhere, and never smoked or anything. And it was one of those things where it's just why? And she was 63 years old, so relatively young, and all of a sudden that whole chaotic time period of being in school and just kind of not doing great in school, emotionally, focus wise, money wise, all that, to being 12 hours away from where I was, it was it just made sense. It was all of a sudden I've got purpose here now that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And so she lived 10 months with cancer before it took her life, but it was like for those 10 months I was her caregiver. Like, and it was, I mean, for someone that's like my mom to me, it was just like returning that, that love. And and because of that situation, the Apple Store didn't work out anymore. After like a year and a half, it was like, you can do a leave of absence for like a small amount of time, but not indefinitely, And we just decided as a family, like, it's best that we can hire a caretaker or you can be the caretaker. And my granny much preferred me to be there. And so there were, I'd say, like maybe like a few months where 3 months went by with like just no income, but I was just my granny's caretaker. And I had already been talking to Mark Gurman because as an Apple Store employee with like, angst and, humor and just like, a kid, I was running an anonymous Twitter account like a lot of people that worked at an Apple Store were, where they vented about the experience. And this is in like the John Broward era of like the New York Times is writing about how poor, relatively poor, the conditions of an Apple Store were. Like, and it was the best job I've ever had compared to Sears. Second job too. But it was also like you could see how it was like it was stressful. I started going to therapy for the first time in my life when I worked at the Apple Store because I started having anxiety attacks at work, which was like had health insurance through Apple, so that was cool. But also it was like, that sort of like triggered that sort of season. And I've gone to therapy since then. But it was like, that was like the, culmination of like stress and fear and anxiety and everything. And the Apple Store like pulled it out of me. And then I went to like my therapist was like, I see a lot of you guys here from the Apple Store.
Wow.
So it was stressful, but because I was doing the anonymous Twitter account, Mark Gurman had like interacted with it and everything. And he was just like, this is hilarious, and maybe there's a little bit of like, trying to build sources within retail, but he's got no problem building sources in any, area he wants to focus on. And it really just became like kind of a friendship where we were just talking on iMessage about going to the gym, and like jokes about Apple stuff, like the community and everything. Like, and so what I ended up doing from that was while I was just caretaking for my granny, it was like, I put up a Squarespace site and it was called not9to5mac.com, Mark Gurman at 9to5mac at the time. And it's like, I'm just going to take like the tweet idea of like parody of like the Onion satirical, but for Apple and technology kind of stuff that like, you've got to be in it to get it. And like Mark got it. And then just do that in like, paragraphs instead of like 140 characters. And so I did that. And I was like literally just writing for Mark Gurman to make him laugh. And like his, response was always like over the top. Just, it was rewarding to me. It was like healing to me. It was like, somebody gets me, like this connection. And so, I think, Mark was talking to Seth Weintraub, our boss, and he was like, change the name of the site. We don't like the name, not 9to5mac.com. Good domain name, but not a good site name for the site. If you're 9to5mac, you don't like it, the association. And so I changed it to apolloreport.com and just kept doing it for a little while. And eventually it was like, Seth could see like, okay, well, you've, in so many words, like you've got writing experience. And I bypassed the whole, like, I want to be a journalist when I grow up. And like, I want to, write in the newspaper about politics or whatever I'm interested in too. Like I actually have this job that I can do now. So, it was amazing. Like I got offered to do, just copy editing. And I was not like working anywhere at the time. So it was like income. And I think I was making more than I was at the Apple Store because it was, quote unquote full time. And I could do that while I was caretaking for my granny. There were times when I was like, relocating and we're going over to the cancer center for chemo. And, but it was all in all, it was like, I think it was a great balance for me personally because it wasn't just like we were in this condo with like sickness and cancer and like, sorrow and pain and fear. It was like I go into my bedroom and it's like a portal into the internet of like self-expression and like producing something, having a purpose of my own. And so I would say like, the 10 months with my granny was just like so valuable to me. Absolutely incredible. And it was made possible because, I would say this, it was possible either way, but it was made better because of 9 to 5 Mac. And then when she passed away, I would have just been like lost, don't know what I'm going to do now. I would have been like without the Apple job at that time, but instead I had, April through November of working 9 to 5 Mac, and I had income and I had money all of a sudden. Like, so what I ended up doing was moving back to South Mississippi, and was talking with a girl I dated before, like that I had broken up with when I moved away, and we just kind of rekindled things. And it was because of 9 to 5 Mac that I was able to go from, caretaking for my granny and, through the end of her life, to having continuity and, copy editing for 9 to 5 Mac, writing for 9 to 5 Mac, kind of like living my dream to be a tech journalist and like learning as I go, bypassing the whole like be a part of a newspaper or like school paper, all that, like you've got to earn your way in, and just like got fast tracked. I mean, joined April 1st of that year, and in June I got to go to San Francisco for the first time to be in the city during WWDC and meet Mark Gurman in person and share a hotel room and just like kick it. And that was just like a fast track to kind of a dream scenario. And I will say, like, 11 years goes by, and like there's been a lot of turbulence, marriage, 2 kids, divorce, pandemic, moving different times, and like all these different scenarios, and like finding myself again. But it's all like the through line through all of it is 9 to 5 Mac has been there as my income and like my purpose, like work wise, and so like it's my origin story, but it's also like just my story. Like the continuity is just I mean, a decade feels long, but it's like it's also just like contained into like one experience. So that's it, man.
That's well, you're to be commended for like just your willingness to take care of your grandma during that time, because not everyone is willing to sacrifice for themselves, like sacrifice their own wants and desires to be able to take care of someone, even if it's a family member. I mean, sad to say, but that's pretty cool. I have a lot of respect for you for that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and it's something that you'll never have regrets of something like that,
No
like
way. Yeah.
ever. Yeah.
I mean, if not for that situation, I do not know where I would have ended up. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't going to go from Sears at the University of South Mississippi to 9 to 5 Mac, I don't think. Like, I was reading, like, Gizmodo and the iPhone 4 leak and a lot of CNET and, like, watching CNET video podcast, and, like, so that was an interest, which is, like, eventually your interest, hopefully become something to do with your work. And like your interest, if you got like the right amount of experience, interest, and talent, I guess, then like that's a good combination for ending up where you need to be. But I couldn't have planned it any better. I mean, it's good.
So what is your day-to-day, like, what's your day-to-day workflow now?
Yeah, 9 to 5. So I like what I like about 9 to 5 Mac is like it's remote. It's always been remote, even before the pandemic and through the pandemic and after. And it's like I've always worked from wherever I live or am. And there's also been structure of when I was on the East Coast, it was literally 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and now I'm in Central Time for the most of my career to 8 to 4. But it's like, I've got friends who like work from home, and it's just sort of you don't have hours, so your hours are all of your hours. And you just try to manage it, but it's like it's super structured. Like I wake up and take the kids to school, get them ready, kind of like chaos, for an hour and a half, and then like hopefully some big Apple news doesn't break during that time, because if so, I'll miss out on it. But like once the kids are at school, come back, empty house, and like I'm just for the next 8 hours, I've got like keep Slack open, keep Twitter open, watch for, watch my inbox, watch messages, like look for stories, think of things. Like, just, it's kind of cool. Like, if you enjoy just sitting and thinking about Apple stuff and technology, like to be able to make that a living, like my job right now is to think of something interesting, and how can I write it in a way that maybe people think is cool. I don't know. But that's it. Yeah.
That's what I appreciate. Number one, the structure. Like when I came to 9 to 5, that's one of the things that struck me the most, is just like the structure of it. It was something that I wasn't expecting, but it was really nice. It was refreshing to have that sort of structure. And then the ability to like come up with your own ideas. Yeah. That's something that I love about it. It's just like, there's no one micromanaging you. It's like you have a freedom of expression, freedom of creativity, but you still work hard.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of work, but it's like, it's really unique. It's a unique place. It's unlike any place I've ever worked at before.
Yeah, it's unlike Sears. It is.
Yeah, definitely.
In the early days, like I know the lack of like someone telling you what to do right now was a little hard for me. Not because I couldn't do it, but because I didn't know that I had permission to kind of like do my thing without asking. And I remember early on there was that meme, before memes were a thing. It's like, it was on Vine. It was kind of viral before it was viral. But it was the woman at the Apple store saying, "Apple Care told me, whatever." She's like had the stroller and she was in the Apple store screaming like, "Apple Care said." And somebody sent that video to me, and it was before like it went viral. And I put it in Hip Chat at the time, and didn't say like, "I'm gonna post this," or like, "Should we post?" I just put it there like waiting for someone to give me permission to write it, like to post it. And it went unnoticed, and then like 6 weeks later it went viral. And I was like, man, I could have like been, part of making that go viral 6 weeks ago. And like, obviously the interest was there in that, like, kind of like funny clip. And I think that was a lesson for me. And like, just go with your gut, and you've got permission to do things. Like, you don't have to hint about, I kind of want to do this thing, kind of do this, you just, like, the best thing to do is just like, take your idea and get it out as fast as possible. And if it's cool, it's cool. If it's not, like, move on to the next thing.
That's a cool story. Nice to get some background on your history with 9 to 5 and just the day-to-day workflow. Now, recently, this isn't the first podcast like a sort of specialty podcast you've had. You've had one with the Apple Watch, and now you've started one for Vision Pro. But before we talk about that, I wanted just to get your overall experience with the Vision Pro, because it's a little bit unique.
Sure, it is. Yeah. Vision Pro. First thing I want to say is it's very expensive, and I don't have one. Like, because I would say, like, as a single dad with 2 kids, it's very hard to prioritize, and so there's that. And so the idea with Visioneers, the podcast that I started, is like, if I can make money directly from talking about Apple Vision Pro, then that can justify buying it and covering it even better. Otherwise, it's like, maybe I'll write about it or not, and it's mainly just because I want to enjoy it myself, So that's like my strategy a little bit. But Apple Vision Pro, like, I went to the Apple Store in New Orleans on the day that it was in stores, and you could like show up and do first come first serve appointments. And I went with a friend of mine named Jacob, and we both were like, we're big Apple nerds, and we're like, let's try out this new thing, and it's going to be incredible. And we were the first 2 in line, and he ended up buying one without planning on it because he just was so blown away by it. And he was like, I'll probably return it in a week. Just want to see what it's like to work with it. And he works remote as well, and he ended up keeping it because like it's his main way to multitask. He in his home office, he had or has like this 43-inch curved super wide monitor, and then one more above that. So it's like a lot of screen real estate and takes up a lot of his room. And but it's still contained within that like rectangle. And with Vision Pro, like he's just like, wow, anywhere I go is like my home office plus more. Like it's just, and so we did a lot of like just kind of airplaying what he saw through his Vision Pro, and like me trying out his Vision Pro. But during the demo, I had a little bit of an issue where like my glasses are my right eye is like needs too much correction for Zeiss to make a lens for it yet. So I just went in kind of blind. Like I've got 20/80 vision without glasses and 20/40 with glasses. So I was using the 20/80 experience, and it was just, at first it was like impossible to use because it wasn't calibrated to my eyes yet. And that was like a critical step. Once we calibrated it, then I could use it. It was just like, not as sharp and clear as possible. But once I was like actually driving it with my eyes and my fingers, and it was like, okay, here we go. This is cool now. And so I just think like Vision Pro in general, it's pricey, but if you can get around that, if you just judge the technology itself, it is a very cool piece of technology. And it's not a gaming console. It's not like the Nintendo Wii or even like DS of headsets in the way that others can feel like. You put it on and you're like, okay, this is like if the company that makes the MacBook Pro made a VR headset or, mixed reality headset, this is what it would be, and that's what it is. So, I think like I've seen people actually wear glasses with it, but it kind of risk like messing up your glasses or the very expensive headset. And so went to a LASIK consultation, and the doctor was like, no, your eyes are too bad. Like, we're not going to be able to get enough to my liking. And he was like, my partner will do it, but not me. And I was like, well, if you don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it. But he said, try scleral contact lenses.
That's what I was going to ask. What about contacts?
So I tried contacts before. I wore them in college whenever I was like, trying to, attract a girlfriend and keep a girlfriend and, not end up alone. And, like after that, it's like, well, these kind of a hassle, and I can see better with glasses and contacts anyway. So for about 10 years, I haven't worn contacts, and tried them last year, like before Vision Pro was even a thing. And it was just like my motivation there was I want to be able to buy, a pair of Ray-Bans and not have to have prescription lenses, and have like different sunglasses. And I did not like the experience. Like it burned, it hurt. I couldn't see very well. And I was like going to a trip in New Orleans one weekend and like wore them there. And before I got there, I pulled over and took them out and put my glasses back on. And that was the last time I wore contacts. So that wasn't great, but it wasn't the scleral contact lenses that have been mentioned to me. And from what both readers, like, we've got some smart readers in like different fields of, like there's this one fella from California who's like the eye doctor. And he's like, here's, basically it was like thousands of dollars of like an appointment and time for free to say like, you may have this situation going on and ask your doctor about this stuff right here and try this out. And it sounds like scleral contact lenses. If I get those, I might be able to see better than with glasses. So that's, and I think that means like, they're comfortable. And then I've also got like peripheral vision where I can see, left and right. And, so I'm going to try that. My next appointment is April 22nd. So it's later this month. That's when insurance kicks back in, like the 1 year period is up, and so I can make that appointment and try it out. So if Vision Pro ends up being like the catalyst for finding a solution without glasses with contacts that work that I had no idea about before, that'll be pretty cool.
Despite all that, the cool thing is that you have access to a Vision Pro. Yeah, like it's just not like you started a Vision Pro podcast and you've don't have the ability to use it at all, which isn't the case. So you did start this new podcast, Visioneers. What was your motivation besides the fact that you wanted to earn some money for Vision Pro? Yeah,
no, it really is like, okay, if this thing is I think Vision as a platform has legs. Like I think it, in the way that the watch is like, it's very much an accessory. I mean, it isn't like a platform on its own that you can replace your Mac with, maybe some phone functions, but you're not going to like do all your work from your Apple Watch, but you can with Vision Pro, I believe. Like, I mean, if you like, it's got, at least on paper, it's got the specs. You know, it's got more RAM than my MacBook Air, and it's got the same processor as my MacBook Air, and like it's wild. So it can be your computer. I think the challenge there then is like the laptop. You can just pop it out in lots of different situations where putting on a headset might not be the thing to do.
That's the biggest thing for me. Like, it's, to me, it's not the like software or lack thereof. It's not even the pass through isn't perfect. Mm-hmm. It's not the fact that you can only have one external screen, although there are other third party apps that let you do more. It's the barrier to entry. Like, every time I want to use it, it's so much. Like, for instance, your iPhone, you pick it up, you unlock, and you're immediately using it. Your Mac, you open the display, you're immediately using it more or less. With the Vision Pro, it's like I have to boot it every single time.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the biggest. Not just that, but it's like unzipping the pouch, putting it on, connecting the power adapter, putting the power adapter, making sure it's secured so I don't knock it off and break it. Like, there's just so much mental baggage that I feel comes with the Vision Pro, which is unlike any other Apple device that we've ever used. To me, that's the biggest barrier. And it's the thing that makes, it's like, I'm sitting here on my couch. Do I want to use my Vision Pro? Yeah, but I have to go through all these steps just to get, and then it takes like 60 seconds to boot on top of that. So what do you think about that?
Here's what I think. I think that I think the future is wireless. I don't know why Apple isn't making new products with wireless charging. AirPods Max, it's got Lightning. We want USB-C, but really, if it had like wireless charging, if I had some like MagSafe or even just like a dock that you put it in and it charges, then they would always be charged, and I wouldn't care about what the port is on it. If the Vision Pro had wireless charging, even if it's like has the battery attached to a cable, but like when you're not using it, you put it on your desk or on the shelf or wherever, your nightstand, on a charging dock that's just like as easy as putting your phone on MagSafe or your watch on the puck, then it would just be ready to go whenever you pick it up. And because it's that plug it up thing, that's like, I think that's a barrier for it just being ready to go whenever you use it. And if you just have it on your desk, I think if you don't shut it down, like it like has like phantom battery, it'll eventually drain. For the Quest 3, Meta sent the Quest 3, and then I bought the Elite strap. I don't know what you call it, but it's got battery built in, and it basically doubles the battery life from around 2 hours to around 4 hours, and that threshold seems to make a big difference. Because 2 hours can be a little more, a little less, but 4 hours seems like I've used it intentionally with 3 browser windows. I've spent a whole workday like writing stories in the Quest 3 with Slack in a browser window and TweetDeck X Pro in a browser window, and then everything else in the middle of a browser window with Apple Music in a tab on the web, iCloud Mail, Gmail for work, plus like whatever I'm browsing in WordPress. And I did that with the controller, just one of the controllers, and then like swipe typing on the keyboard by clicking and waving the wand around. That was pretty good, and that required like being wired in to do a full day like that. But I really think that's like why are there premium Apple products that don't have wireless charging? I feel like for me alone, like that's like to have it just be ready to go. Like if it's down, have it just be slow charging, and if it's pick it up, ready to go. Yeah,
and a standby. Like I wish there was like just maybe just a little battery in that thing to save your settings, to save where you were, so it doesn't have to completely boot every single time, because if you keep it plugged up, it drains. And yeah, so that's the biggest, it's just a barrier to entry. But despite that, it's a great product. I have a lot of fun with it. I've kept mine. Yeah. So
yeah, when my friend was on like day 12, I was like, what are you going to do?
It's a great consumption device, but it's also a pretty good productivity device, in especially thinking outside the box. Like with your podcast, the recent episode talked about a music creation app. It's an impressive piece of work for sure.
I mean, that's one way people use Macs is like music creation, you know. And if you can bring that same capability to, you know, Vision Pro and the spatial environment where you can just have like lots of stuff around you, you know. I mean, I think like the fact that it even works at all is like, and you can have it work with MIDI controllers, you know, with an actual like physical keyboard, you know, piano. It's pretty cool because you don't have ports, you know, and it's like just to be able to pull that off is just pretty cool, like pretty futuristic, I think. And the thing about Animo Galaxy that caught my attention, like it was in the initial list of apps from Apple when they did a press release, but I just didn't catch it. And then when I saw it like actually be released and shown off, it's like, whoa, that's a different experience. It isn't like a 2D flat window, you know, it's floating in space. It's like the thing I wrote about was like when you're creating music, a lot of it is feeling, a lot of it is environment. Like it's half and half. If you want to capture the feeling of like whatever it is, like you know, space, and you want to capture that like an atmosphere or something like on the ground, like having those visuals around you kind of feeds into the mood, and like you have to like convince yourself that you're there to create it through music. And if you can transport yourself to any space like that with Vision Pro and then create music in that environment that you create, it's like it's kind of a shortcut to, you know, to creativity. Like it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think that's a big bonus because like with the Mac, yeah, you can create music on your Mac, right? But to have tangible like feedback that like, for instance, with a MIDI controller, to have it in space, to be able to see the instruments or the synthesizer, whatever the case may be in space, it's a different type of feel, and music creation in that way just feels more natural to me. Like for instance, I heard on the podcast that he actually worked with, what's his name? Is it Garrett? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he worked with Roger Lynn, who's like invented the MPC, which I use the MPC all the time and making beats and I love this thing. It's a legendary. I mean, it changed the game. Period. Like the MPC changed the game, and that was cool just to hear that history there. Yeah, there's something about having the ability to have tangible, like physical controls, and then you have that with the sort of augmented experience of Vision Pro.
Specific to that episode, like the Apple Vision Pro is super interesting. But then I think what was the bonus for me was that Garrett Bevan was super interesting. Like his origin story of like, you know, interested in music, interested in technology, interested, you know, and like futuristic ways to make music. I mean, he worked with the Instrument. He basically like pre iPad and Vision Pro, like what are the physical versions of something different like that? And he did that. And then when I was researching for the episode, I found where he was demoing the Animoog iPad app that's like, I mean, 2010, and he doesn't work for Moog Music then. He's now like he leads the, you know, Animoog and those projects, but he was just a consumer, just like, here's a cool thing. I like iPads. It's brand new. I like Moog. Here's a new app from Moog for the iPad. And to see, like, you know, fast forward all these years later, he leads this project for, you know, kind of, I mean, like the Vision Pro has roots on the iPad, and it's kind of like that expression of an operating system, but spatial. It was pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. Like just to go from a fan to like leading the project was pretty cool. So where can people find, like, obviously, if they want to subscribe to the podcast, how do they do that?
Yeah, it's in Apple Podcasts, and I don't think I've really put it anywhere else yet. But I mean, there's an RSS feed. But if you search Apple Podcasts for Visioneers, you will find it. If you search for 9 to 5 Mac, you should find it in that list. And it's got very cool artwork made by our colleague Michael Bauer, and he that was part of it for me. Was like, okay, I got a name, have a premise, have a list of guests who I want to talk to, but like the packaging is a big part of it for me. And like that, once he made the artwork for it, And then he gave me like a long description of like why he made what decisions he made. I was like, okay, sold. And now I have to actually like make this thing real.
Dude, that artwork is one of the best pieces of podcast artwork. Like, that's what actually initially attracted me. Like, I need to listen to this because it was like the artwork. It was awesome. It's like, dude is super talented.
So then, like, the choice was which one do I use for like the official podcast artwork, and I think I went with white background.
You made the right choice. Yeah. It is super fresh. Yeah. So you just one last thing, like you were talking at the beginning about Things,
yes.
And I think Things was a sponsor for the podcast. Yeah. So that's awesome. One of my favorite apps of all time. How do you use Things? Is it like something you use day to day? Is it like you first thing you do when you wake up? And do you use the getting thing like David Allen's whole methodology, or have you kind of like created your own system?
Back to my origin story, Mark Gurman in 2013 was a Things user and turned me on to Things. And, you know, I bought like every version of it. And it's just been like thinking of an idea of something to do is easy. Doing it takes time. And there's a million distractions along the way. But if you can just like capture that, if you can have a system that you can just quickly capture your idea and then have a catalog of those ideas, eventually you're going to come to a time in your life, like, you know, in your day or your week or your month, whatever, where you're like, what do I do today? You know? And, you know, I realized by using Things, like there's a million things that you can do in a day, but you've just got to pick one. And then that's the first step to, you know, making something every day. And that's what Things have been for me, is like, it's like kind of personal like that. Like, you know, I never don't know what I can do. Yeah. It's work, it's family, it's hobbies, it's, you know, it's like, and I talk about, you know, when we did the ad spot, they were going to write talking points for me. And I was like, what I pitched first though was let me just kind of go freestyle, because just do a personal endorsement, because I do have used it for 10 years plus. And the key for me that I always think about is like, if somebody like deleted Things and like erased my database, and it wasn't backed up, I would be a little lost and like, man, I had a lot of plans. Like, you know, it's like an outline of like, you know, it's like a roadmap, you know, and that always kind of feels like, yeah, that's the value in it for me is you know, what I put there, and you know, you can look back at your logbook and see everything you've captured, and it's like, okay, you know, if you feel like you haven't done much lately, you're like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, and it's just nice to get the stuff, like I think David Allen calls it open loops. Yeah. Like it's stuff that takes up brain cycles in your head. Like, for instance, you know you have to do something, and if you don't write it down and capture it, then it's just always around there spinning, and it's taking up, like, you're always worried about it in the back of your head. Whereas when you write it down, you get it off your mind and you free up that brain cycle to do other things. And I think that's the most valuable part. And then the ability to break down a task. Like you say, I want to make a video on my studio. Well, yeah, but there's a million other steps involved in that. And just kind of like breaking each of those steps down.
That's a project, not a task.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, I asked them to be like the premier sponsor because it's just like, I love the company and the people there are great and everything. And I went to do the ad copy for it, because I did say I want to do a personal endorsement. Like I could have just like spoken out loud, or typed in the computer like the copy, but I was kind of like, I want to do this more naturally, and so I use a Kindle Scribe paper tablet. It's 10 inches. It's e-ink. It has a pen that you write on. It feels like paper, you know, without a screen protector, and you know, has USB-C, and then like lasts for weeks on a charge. And that's like my notebook. And so I was in bed. I started writing like, you know, what I want to say. And I wrote it out on that. And then I read it from that. And it felt kind of cool. It was like, that's before the iPhone and the Mac and my life and the iPad, etc. You know, we were in school with pen and paper, and I found that was a very creative use of my, like, just pen and paper was like a different tool than the confines of whatever app you're using. But pen and paper, like the physical objects today, I have a hard time keeping up with, or it's just not with me whenever I want it. And so with the Kindle Scribe, I found that it lets me do that writing out part of, I mean, that's part of learning, is like writing can be helpful for that. And the Kindle Scribe is like, I start writing in the margins and like, drawing pictures too, and like just express. It's almost like a free form on Apple platforms. It's just like a physical device to use it too. That wasn't the iPad. Like if there's like this crazy rumor that the iPad will have a matte version of the screen as an option. If they did that, and I'd be really interested in that.
Okay, so here's my thought on that: is like an Apple Pencil and a matte screen. That seems like either they would have to come up with some different sort of tip so it wouldn't damage the screen. Because, like for instance, the Pro Display XDR or the Studio Display, you can't even wipe it with a cloth, regular cloth. So I'm like, how's that? Are they going to put the matte surface beneath the top display? Like, how's that? I was just wondering, like, how's that going to actually work in practice? And if it's more of a matte for blocking reflections versus a matte for the tactile sort of feedback that you would get.
Yeah, I think if I had to prioritize, it would be tactile feedback over the reflective issue, and just like slipperiness, avoiding that kind of thing. And I've used a paper like screen protector with an iPad and an Apple Pencil, really good, but e-ink is like is wild. Like, it's this old technology that just keeps getting better, and I like it a lot. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Zac. I appreciate you taking the time. Like, you didn't have to do this. So with Fernando out, it's nice to catch up with you. And we definitely got to have you on again when Fernando's here. Man. And we'll all get together and talk.
Maybe when that nanotexture iPad comes out, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. Let's make that happen. Hopefully that'll be sooner than later.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right, man. I hope you have a wonderful day. And again, it was nice talking to you. Again, where can people find your work?
Always on 95 Mac. I'm on social at ApolloZac, APOLLOZAC.
All right. We'll catch you next time, Zac. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Jeff.